Hey, fellow Giganteers, those of us who like our spirituality with a twist. So we are in the midst of what is kind of like a bigger series, the America What the Hell series, as we kind of try to help people figure out where the country where we live kind of implodes on itself from the inside. And I think other people do things like news of the week, but us being the kind of podcast that we are, we're trying to give people bigger picture ideas that I think help inform what we're looking at in the world around us, but also are kind of like bigger picture ideas too. So we're in the midst of a thing called the emotional plague. This comes from the great and quirky psychologist, one Wilhelm Reich. And this is his idea that societies and cultures can have these sort of psychologically toxic ideas that are in a sense kind of contagious. They spread around, and all of a sudden you see the whole society, the whole culture kind of like infused with this pathological stuff. Wild in that he came up with this idea before social media even. He was already recognizing this was a thing that happened. Um, the other part of this is that if you haven't heard previous episodes, one of his ideas is it not only does damage to the mind, but it does damage to the body too. And this is his idea that the body and the mind are linked in this way that you can kind of see they feed back off of one another. So if you have damage to the mind, it'll damage the body. Body damage to the body will damage the mind. And that got us into like part of our home base with this, which we've been talking through, which is traditional Chinese medicine. Like that's our day jobs. And and you can kind of like combine these two notions. You can almost see like how the emotional plague negatively affects the way Chinese medicine thinks about the body. Our episode for today is specifically focused on the problems of the liver, which Chinese medicine ties into ideas of problems with anger, definitely a social problem, right? So we wanted to do this one next. And then it's as far as like the positive personality traits that can be undermined when you have problems with this, is they talk about a problem being benevolent, a problem being magnanimous and open to sharing with others. So it kind of kills those parts of the person. And you get more. Okay, let me do the other thing first, and I'll throw it off to you, Dana. So let me do the thing that I always have to do, and I'll forget, which is, but first, if you could do the thing that everyone asks you to do, help us overcome the emotional plague of the algorithm for our little podcast. So many podcasts out there. It's a crowded space, but we really try our best to bring really valuable materials out to people. So if you can give us a shout out, either a like or a positive review, or share the podcast with other people and just kind of help us get the word out of what we're trying to do, that would be greatly appreciated. Anyways, Daniel, yet more you want to say about the general concept of that before we dive into the specifics?
No.
Nope, you're good. All right.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the only thing I'll say, and we'll probably get to it when we get in it, is that like, the liver or the gallbladder also,
Mhm.
both are part of the wood element for those for very few Chinese medicine folks who are listening. Um, but it not only is it when there is a disruption in that system, you will be frustrated and angry. Simultaneously, if you are frustrated and angry, there will be a disruption in that system. So you mentioned it earlier that it goes kind of in both directions. I didn't say go both ways because that has sexual connotation to it, and that's not what we're talking about right now.
You have to make America great again, and it's not obvious that it's making America great again either. Going both ways.
Right, right.
Yes.
So, but so I guess what I'm saying is that like you can have something in your mind that is affecting your body, and that, like you said, something in your body that's affecting your mind. You could have something that you ingest that affects your body, therefore affects your mind, and other way around. And so things like alcohol and we'll probably get into that more towards the end, but these things can certainly affect those systems, which maybe well, I'll leave it for now. So sort of forecasting as to how or foreshadowing as to how substances or foods or lifestyles can affect this system, and then those things will look very similar to many of the habits that people have, but we'll leave that as
Yeah,
a
yeah, that's
you
like
know
foreshadowing or something like that of like things to
yeah.
come.
Yeah, so sorry
Yeah.
if you tuned out, if you're tuning out after right now, you're gonna miss all the good stuff. But
Well, no, that's like when you really like kind of think about it, it's almost like beyond going both ways. It's like you can get it from every direction or something like that, so to
hmm
speak.
hmm
Yeah. And not in the best sense of that word, in negative
No,
senses of that word.
yeah, no, this not
Yes.
this is not a positive orgy. This is a
No,
negative one.
this is a negative, angry, toxic orgy. Much worse than walking out with chlamydia or something like that.
Yeah,
Much
yeah,
worse.
yeah.
All right. So what can you say about this? You get anger and this whole system. And obviously the culture is like really angry. And if you
Yeah.
like look around, part of what we were talking about last episode was, is there like a compassion vacuum? I think, yeah, right. And now you get to the point where you're talking about like not an anger vacuum, but like an anger like just flood, right, all over the place. Now, one of the things I know you like to talk about, Daniel, is sort of like the social media aspects and the media overall is sort of an anger creating machine. I don't know if you want to do a little bit on that as you like to do or not, but that's obviously one of the things that, comes up a lot, the whole way in which, everything is kind of tweaked to induce these angry states.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it many times before. So for our, regular audience, sorry for the repetition, but for our new audience, I, the algorithm, specifically on Facebook, but probably on Instagram as well, but I think from Facebook a little bit more, um, is designed to trap your attention, and your attention is more easily trapped when you're pissed off about things, you know, and negativity spreads so much faster than positivity. Just think about a business. You can find a business, like I say, a Google business page. And I know this because, I have my own, and many of my friends who are, small business owners, entrepreneurs, they have their own as well. You get one or two negative reviews, that really hurts. So you kind of
Mhm.
you're almost like it's we don't have one of those social scores like they do in China, thankfully, but through this way we kind of do. And if you hear something negative about somebody, that really outweighs all of the positive work that they've done. It really, really
That's
weighs
really
heavily.
bizarre, isn't it, on
Yeah.
some level? It's really true, but it's bizarre that it's like that. Hmm.
And
Yeah,
so
it's
with
very
the
strange.
with the social media aspect, that's already been keyed into long ago as to what to feed people. And so then the algorithm feeds you more what it is they believe you're paying attention to because that's beneficial for them to sell you ad revenue and to keep you engaged in the app because like we said many times before, right now, gold is booming, okay? But what else is he booming even more? Your attention is on a parabolic rise. And so you'll see this in many different ways. And the one way that I'll mention now is apps will want to keep you on their app. So they get you to quote unquote unlock things and they want to offer you stuff because there's so many places that you can put your attention. They need you to stay in their system, not just so that they can get you to buy things or whatever. Of course, that's the end goal, but it's even larger than that. They want your attention there because the more that you're ingrained in something, the more that you're used to it, the more that it becomes a part of your life, you don't even realize its uh, effect on your time, how much more time you're inputting onto a particular thing. And so you become closer to this, enigmatic application, if you will, whatever that application is, gambling or social media or whatever, you don't realize how much time you're spending on it until it's like you're spending a lot of time on that thing. So the more in which somebody, some being, right, we'll call it the algorithm, but can keep you engaged with things, the more that they have your attention, the more that they can you do something with that. And in most cases, you're going to spend more time being pissed off than you are going to be probably watching, random cat videos and smiling and moving on with your day. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
That's
mean,
and that's this shit.
I heard even with the apps thing, I heard a wild stat today, and I didn't have a chance to fact check it, but like when, like in the gambling apps or something like that, there's like statistics that kind of show that when Sunday comes through and everyone loses on the football things, like domestic violence apparently just goes up. Like you can see a statistical surge, like it correlates, right?
Mm,
And you can tie it into like the NFL schedule, and that's when everyone found out that their parlay bets all lost. And then, you get this surge of like domestic violence. And again, I didn't have a chance to fact check it, but it fits into all of that.
hmm
These surges of anger that kind of like
hmm
start to be mitigated by people's engagement with these things. I like little case studies. So I happened to stumble across one, and I can't remember the name of the journalist, but she was writing about her father, who was like a vet. I don't remember if it was Korea or something like that. Older guy, kind of peaceful, greatest generation, probably kind of dude. And then something happened where he got like tuned into Fox News.
Mm.
It's like sort of like one of those hate mongering kind of, what would you even call it? It's cultish, obviously, but it's also trying to like generate all of these like emotions, right? Always trying to
Mm-hmm.
tweak on people's emotions
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as these outlets do. And he went to like, he got more and more fanatical. And he started to get like depressed and show all these problems. And eventually they're just like, we got to cut him off of this. So they just cut him off and he started to like renormalize back, towards the person he was before. So, I mean, maybe that's something we can all look at. Um, I'm like not pleased with the state of the world, but there is a part where all of us as spiritual beings have to like take a step back,
Yeah.
recenter ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
maybe not avoid and tune out totally in some state of denial, but also like make sure that you don't get so, you know, uh, entwined with what's happening that you
Correct.
sort of lose that part of yourself that can keep that healthy psychological frame, right?
Yeah, and to the, to those who are, listening who have influence on other people, I hosted an event on Sunday, and the the majority of the people who came are healers and teachers, you know, massage people, all kinds of people who they treat other people, they work with other people. And it's nice to see, first of all, it's an honor to be able to do that work with those folks who touch so many other people, because indirectly I feel like I can help other people through them, which is great. Number one. But for those who are listening to this, if you have influence over other people, Eric and I both talk about, real life shit while we're on here, because it's important to stay engaged, because you do have to know the struggles of others. You have to. Especially if you're living in this world, right? If you're going to leave this world, then it doesn't matter anymore. And I don't mean kill yourself. I mean, um, moving.
Renounce or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
renounce and just say, okay, I'm selling everything and I'm moving. That's what I'm talking about. But if you're going to find balance here and try and maintain yourself so that you can help to guide other people intentionally or unintentionally, you it's really, really important to try and find enough engagement that you feel like you understand what's happening, but not so much that you lose yourself in the process, because then you're not really good to other people, let alone yourself. And I don't know where that line is. That line is certainly different from everybody. I think it depends on kind of how sensitive you are, and how easily you can detach from stuff. So some people can totally tune in and then just turn their phone off, turn the TV off, whatever, and then go about their life, no problem, and they can be totally in and then not. And other people, if they see a little bit, they're like totally blown away, and they're just so energetically sensitive that they get very attached very easily. And I think for those people, they have to kind of take their consumption down a little bit. So we're certainly can't tell anybody what to do. We're just talking. We're making a recording, and people hopefully are going to listen to it at some point, But this is a reminder for everybody's engagement to find a balance that you feel good, that you understand or you know about what's happening in the world, and you could share your compassion, but that simultaneously, it is not changing who you are in the process of you doing that.
Yeah, I find this kind of fascinating. I had this a little bit in how I was thinking about the episode for today, because when you get it, like, if you filter it through this idea of emotional plague, which is the theme of the episode, right? In different ways, we're getting back to the anger aspects of this, but
Mm-hmm.
on an individual level, you sort of realize in the context of this concept of emotional plague, if you want to be a spiritually free individual or an artistically free individual, there's like certain kinds of ways. If you want to be that way in the world, then there's a certain thing on an individual level where I think you really do have to say, okay, I'm stepping away from this emotional plague. I'm going to step away from it. And it's almost like the ability to jettison whatever parts of those that we might have taken on in the course of our getting the contagions of the emotional plague
Mm-hmm.
have to go, right? I
Mm-hmm.
stumbled on a quote from Jung about this concept, kind of. He says, well, on the one hand, psycho-spiritual growth comes from, learning new things and all this kind of stuff, but I'm paraphrasing. But on the other hand, psychological stuff, improvement comes from like purging the negative.
Mm.
And in some ways, that's a much more difficult and unpleasant process, but you have
Definitely.
to do that, right? And then
Definitely.
Reich's idea is that a lot of that stuff will be toxicities that are kind of around you, right? And you have to learn how to get out of that. I think especially if you want to be a spiritual person or a creative person, because that'll hold you back, you know? And even if you're not one of those kinds of people, it is something to be, if those aren't your goals, right? If you don't identify with those kinds of things in particular, it's still something to be aware of because it's really a way to get kind of like sucked down into the muck of things, right? And there's an individual level. On the other hand, there's kind of a collective level of this too, right? Where, at times the emotional play goes really, really toxic. And in Reich, he wrote the book Mass Psychology of Fascism about this. What happens when things go really toxic in a society and everything starts to really go darkened. And when I look at him as kind of an example, he's interesting because he did get that you have to, like, on some psychological level, pull yourself away so you don't get devoured by the things around you. And
Mm,
yet, as far as him and in terms of his life, he was a pretty bold person and he kept like communicating and standing up to powerful forces, saying, okay, no, we have to keep, trying to build more awareness, build more education, build more tolerance and love and whatever, more knowledge, right? And ultimately, we didn't talk a lot about his story in these episodes, but he gets put in president of the United States and he dies, right? As part of the emotional plague in the United States, dies in the 1950s. So, people go after him, right, for doing this. He's kind of martyred in a way.
mm,
Um, but we're in this kind of weird time where like we're all going to have to figure out, okay, I think we do have to stay engaged somehow, right? Otherwise, wouldn't be doing these episodes, right? What would be the
right.
point, right? We just do something that was escapism. But we're trying to not do escapism, but we're also trying not to also make the point of like there's an individual level of like spiritual development that involves working on oneself still
Mm,
and purging
hmm.
this out while you try to keep one foot in the world of like, let me try to make a difference to help during a time that's like chaotic and toxic,
Right.
right? So we're still out there trying to make a difference. I guess that's trying to be a bodhisattva,
Well, that Eric, that sounds.
right? That's the Buddhist idea, right? Mhm.
Who said spiritual growth through learning or purging? Who said that? You just said
I
that?
was I was talking about Carl Jung.
Yeah, I mean that that's a deep, not to beleaguer the point, but that's like a real deep observation.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I know a few people who, learn through purging, and those are people are pretty hardcore. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? Like those are medicine work kind of people. You know what I'm saying? Um, but then people have this idea that like they're gonna grow like through learning, and there's a lot of iconography in the Buddhist tradition. Obviously, we don't have to name all of them because that was just not worth our time. But um, there's a lot of that because that's almost like taking on new things. There's a dopamine aspect to that, right? You're always being inundated with something new. Let me learn something new. Let me learn something new. And maybe this is just a kind of like a moment of realization for me. That's definitely what I do. Always trying to learn, maybe not new things, but deeper things, less, much less than the purgation, much less,
Mhm.
because purging is hard.
Yeah.
Purging requires effort. I
And
mean,
in a weird way, it's like kind of, I know it's a strange way to put it, but in a weird way, it's kind of like less sexy.
oh, it's way less sexy. It's hard
Hmm.
work. I mean, I lead these breath work and meditation workshops, where it's highly, highly, highly cathartic for sure. And people are really exhausted afterwards. They feel very relaxed, but and some of which are in beautifully deep states of samadhi without a ton of meditation at all. Actually, they're just there.
Hmm.
People are yelling around them. There's drums and gongs being played, and they're like, not asleep, but definitely not awake and not bothered by anything. And that comes from all that work. So I don't know. That's
I mean,
just a,
we ran our G&T retreat together earlier in the year, and you can
yeah,
get to those places, right?
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So for people who are listening, obviously this is um, a kind of discussion that you're not going to hear on TV. You're not going to hear it from your favorite influencer. It's a conversation that I don't even know if that gets had even unless you're on a retreat, really. that or taking some education, via generally like East Asian spiritual traditions where enlightenment is the central focus, not an aspect of the teaching. It is the focus. And then whatever teaching you have is moving you towards that final path, towards that state, and it may be windy or there may be multiple paths, but that's the goal. You know what I'm saying? That that is the goal of, we've talked about this, but I think it's been a while. That is the goal of the overarching, because we talked about this before we went on Mike, Eric, and sorry, audience, for always doubling back. But like that is when you have um a North Star, if you will, of something that transcends the mundane, then
With that.
and I'll use this for your word, Eric, this abstract view of the potentiality of life is not parallel to most people. Okay. Meaning that the things that they value and you value are not going to be different and similar. So Eric might value electronics because he really loves them, but I might value cars because they're cool for me. But they're both worldly shit that we can save our money and buy. That's not what, and you just fi fill in the blanks on those things and make them individual for you or your brother or sister, or friends or whatever. This is different. What I'm saying is this doesn't line up with those things. Yes, of course, the people would love to be on retreat in a beautiful place and be able to take time off and relax and learn. Yes, but their overarching life theme is very different than other people. And therefore, they're able to kind of like roll with the punches in a different way than those who don't have that North Star of enlightenment or of a deep realization or of deep compassion or, some of these things that are sort of transcendent of just everyday experience. And I think that that is not talked about. It's not talked about at all, period, because don't nobody really care. It's heaven, hell, God, no God. These are the questions. That's kind of it, And then if there is a
Yeah.
God, then which one? What's their name? I'm sorry. What's his name? Because it's never there. They don't like that. God
Mhm.
definitely, in most people's eyes, as a penis,
Mhm.
even,
Yeah.
which makes no sense.
Penal God, penal
Yeah,
God.
penile
Yeah.
God, and never is there any ever real responsibility put on the individual to do development or to experience growth. And when you take this kind of desire upon yourself, your life changes and the way that you see things fitting into it changes. So I'm not trying to influence anybody to change their life or do anything else. I'm just saying that, Eric and I, and I'm sure many of our listeners do share this particular aspect of understanding and ways of being, meaning enlightenment or realization, however you want to call it, as kind of like the uh, the light that illuminates our particular candle that's lighting the path to where we're going.
I like it because Jung had, I dug up the quote because like I did a little snap on it from my phone when I came across it. So he says, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light. Ha! Perfect. But by making the darkness conscious. That's a mix. You do kind of gather light and purge darkness, but okay, he's making a point.
Hmm.
Uh, but he does say the latter procedure, the making the darkness conscious, however, is disagreeable and therefore not popular. I like it. I thought that one cracked me up. Therefore, not popular. Wah. Yeah. And I think as far as the emotional plague thing, I think what Reich is talking about is then you have to get a little bit of like have like that attitude. Look, I'm going to target not my fellow citizens. I'm going to target instead those aspects of emotional plague inside of me that I can then recognize as being problematical, and I'll start to get rid of them.
Mm,
Right.
mm,
And in that sense, and goes deep, this is like Jung's talking about it, but like every Taoist or Tantrika eventually makes this point, Zen person, all of our shaman, all of our favorite people will ultimately do this to say, yeah, you got to target those aspects and then Reich, target those aspects of like emotional plague inside yourself. And sometimes you can source them back and you can say, oh, that's a cultural thing from here or there that's kind of toxic. Some of it's personal, some of it's beyond just our own personal thing, that are issues that are kind of like indicative of the place where we live and we know our kind of bad things that we should get rid of. So, that's the take home. Hmm. Why not? How you want to do this, Daniel? We'll end up having like 2 episodes on anger. How do you want to handle it? You want to call this a thing, or should we?
Let's call it a thing. And we'll get to the anger stuff next time just because we don't have the time, in 10 minutes we're not going to be able to knock it out.
Yeah, there's so much anger. We're not going to be able to
There's
do it
so
in
much
10
anger.
minutes.
So sorry if you feel frustrated that we didn't get to the things that we talked about. You know, I don't know. Do some deep breathing, you know what I mean?
No, I think the thing in the end of this deal is that we did get to was whether it's anger or any of these emotions, like there's a way in which you can see it as like a personal thing. I'm gonna work out with it myself.
Hmm.
I'll target emotional plague inside myself.
Hmm.
I'll identify those things I feel are toxic within me and I'll target them,
Mm.
right? I might even study my culture and society to go, you know what? I don't like that in this culture and society.
Yeah.
I think I got some of that shit in me. I'm going to target that and I'm going to work my way through that and I'm going to eliminate that. Right.
Hmm.
And then the other side is like what we're getting to also, like these things can be kind of like epidemic
Yeah.
emotional plague. And so we're trying to talk on 2 levels. So maybe it was nice that we set this episode up to kind of address that.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
more anger next week.
Yeah, for sure. Super pissed.
Yeah. Don't worry. It's not going to get any less angry by next week.
Yeah, no,
There's still
no.
going to be anger next week.
Yeah.
I predict next week America will still be angry.
Yeah.
Let's bet on that.
Yeah,
What
we can
odds
bet
can I
on
get on
that.
that?
Yeah.
Zero.
Yeah.
Zero
Yeah.
odds. All right. Thanks,
Awesome.
Daniel.
Yeah, no, Eric, thanks so much. And audience, thank you
Yeah.
for tuning in. We appreciate everybody who, consumes our products. There's a lot of things that you could be putting your attention on at this point, and we don't charge anything for obviously for what we do. So if you like our work, like, comment, subscribe, send us an email, the gin or gin and tantra at gmail.com. You could hit us up on the gram at the Gin and Tantra podcast. Or if you know us personally, what's up? Say what's up. Share your love, your hate, your indifference. It matters, kind of, but we appreciate it. So, because it takes time, and that's a valuable resource, apparently, for those who understand time to be only in one direction. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, thank you everybody for tuning in and for your effort. For Eric, this is Daniel. We'll catch you guys in the next one.